Good afternoon, Westwood, and welcome to the Wolverine Report, episode 20. Evan Cardimino, Charlotte Lynch, Maurice Fiscaldo, and I'm Morgan Donahue. And folks, today we have a very special guest. It is a special week, Thanksgiving week. What that means is the greatest rivalry in mass football, Westwood and Holliston. And we are absolutely delighted to have two members of the very first game that was ever played in this rivalry in 1974. We have classmates in 1975 grads of Westwood High School, Dave Whalen, Bill Irvine. Guys, how are you? And thanks so much for joining us.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So you both were part of the 1975 graduation class at Westwood High School. How special was it for both you growing up in Westwood? What was it like growing up then, and how special were those bonds? Obviously, you guys are still good friends, and bonds that have carried over for generation to generation.
Well, Westwood's changed a lot since when we grew up. It was a much quieter town, less houses, bigger families, but it was the same type of town. Dave and I, we've known each other since we went to school, played Little League together, went to the same college, played high school sports together, so it's been a lifelong relationship. And, the greatest thing about sports from, I think, my vantage point, and I think Dave would say the same thing, is you just make so many great relationships with people. And that's what you don't remember the scores of the plays as much as like the feelings you had, like being in the locker room and being with these guys that just, friends you have for life.
Absolutely.
It's pretty cool.
Morgan and I have had a chance to talk with Kathy Delaney-Smith, and we had Jim and Joey Fabiano on an upcoming episode. The 70s, and what we've learned is that the 70s were one of the most dominant eras in Westwood High School sports history. Can you kind of give us a little snapshot of what Westwood High School sports looked like in the 70s for you guys as athletes?
Sure. Go ahead. What?
No, it's just a terrific place to play. I mean, we had great coaches, as Bill said, great teammates. Everybody worked hard, and good competitors. I mean, we were meant to go out and play hard, play fair, learn all our coaches stressed fundamentals, and it worked out.
Yeah. I mean, as Evan mentioned, Kathy, in our conversation with her, one thing that became abundantly clear was her players were so hard. They were very hardworking. They were so focused. I mean, they went on a 96-game win streak, and I'm asking questions about were they even thinking about that? And she's saying not really. They just so why they were so dialed in of wanting to win, and it just made me think of the sports culture here in Westwood. We've had other dynasties since then. Girls lacrosse, girls basketball did it again in the late 90s, early 2000s. Could you see how special that sports culture was in the 70s? Just a lot of athletes and a lot of fierce competitors that just hated losing. Was that something that was apparent during the times you guys played at Westwood High School?
I think it was, absolutely. And I think one thing that was important was the history and the tradition.
Yeah.
The teams and players in the 60s, you looked up to them. You wanted to meet or exceed what they did.
Yeah.
And that's why you work so hard, and those games meant something. Every game meant something, and particularly, I'm sure we'll get into it, the Thanksgiving Day game.
Absolutely.
And the leadership in the athletics department was amazing. I mean, you had George Bader, who was the AD when we got there, and then you had Russ Downs, and you had Joe Guerin. So you had three guys that really cared about individuals, about doing the right thing. The values they taught us was amazing. Mm-hmm. And then, with Joe particularly, with the onset of Title IX with women's sports, they were so fortunate to get someone like Kathy Delaney, soon to be Kathy Delaney-Smith. She changed the whole culture of women's athletics at Westwood. And, guys on the football team respected her immensely.
Yeah. I mean, and she was also dominant as a swim coach. I don't think she lost a swim meet as well. And it seemed like at that time, a lot of these coaches coached multiple sports. So I saw Joe Guerin was like the swim coach.
Correct. Right.
And I'm glad you mentioned George Bader. So my generation doesn't know, that's who the gym's named after, Bader Gymnasium.
He was the link to the 60s Dave talked about.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Just a huge part of the culture.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about him, because my generation, they're not as aware of George Bader. How special of a person was he? He's always a major part of those winning teams in the culture as the AD. What was he like having as an athletic director?
Well, he was omnipresent. He was around every practice, every game. I think he was the guy who ultimately handed out everybody's uniforms and wished you a good season. So you knew it really mattered to him, and because it mattered to him and it mattered to the coaches, it mattered to you as well. Always there for a piece of advice. I think originally, I'm not sure about this, I think he was a football coach as well. Earlier on, but just a great athletic director who cared about the players and the coaches.
And he was an athletic director to everyone. No one ever really had him as a coach. Yeah. So unlike, Coach Downs, who Dave and I were coached by him in baseball, and he was our junior high soccer as well as basketball coach. Mr. Bader was Mr. Bader. Yeah. He wasn't Coach Bader. He was Mr. Bader. So it was a little different, and he had kind of a place of, he was definitely the path, the pathway to the past as well.
That was a different time, back then than it is now. And a lot of times we talk with athletes, there was a lot of tough love. Was there tough love from coaches, where at the end of the day, for the most part, they're right. They're turning us into men. I guess a two-part question. Was there tough love when it came to some of the coaches you had at Westwood? And on top of that, when you look at, anything you've gone through in life, do you, tap into some of your experience in sports? A lot of life in sports do kind of cross over. Has there been examples where sports has made you more prepared for obstacles you've gone through in life?
Well, I remember a lot of tough. I don't know about the love, but there was the coaches all cared about you as well. But certainly you took a lot out of what you learned from playing sports at Westwood High School, and I think. Starting with Coach Downs, we all had him as a phys ed teacher in 7th and 8th grade. And it was fundamentals before anything else. And I think as you go through life, and certainly as I went through business, I'd go back to that. Whenever something sort of got out of whack, I'd say, okay, let's get back to the fundamentals. What do we know works? What do we know? What do we evaluate and see if it's not working? How do we fix it? And generally, when you do that and have the ability to take a step back and think about what you've been taught and how things are supposed to be done the right way, it works you through a lot of issues. And I think when I look back on my athletic career at Westwood High School, that's probably the thing that I took out most, starting with Coach Downs, and there's just so many of them, Coach Tuselli and Coach Twing, and just really good people who did things the right way.
And, guys like Joe Guerin that coached us in freshman year of football, so our first sport in high school, so the big transition from junior high, and all of a sudden you're in a much bigger school. I mean, when we went to high school, there was 1,100 kids in the high school, much bigger school than it is today. Yeah. And Joe Guerin was kind of our first portal into like organized sports at that level. And, we are so grateful and so exceptionally thankful for his friendship. I mean, you see Joe maybe once a quarter, a couple times a quarter for breakfast. And I tell our buddies from college, like on the text chain, like very few people have that type of relationship that we do with our town. It's amazing.
Awesome. I used to see Russ Downs at Dunkin' Donuts. Joe at St. Margaret Mary's,
right.
Singing. And
I think one other thing that's important to mention is we had fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fun. I mean, we had our JV baseball coach, Davey Walsh. He was
great guy,
just a fantastic guy, and made it. You wanted to get to practice, and you wanted to with all of these guys and get ready for the game. But it was always a lot of fun in some ways.
Yeah. So before you get to high school, what was the youth level like when it comes to organized sports? Like growing up, we were lucky to have like Phil Azak. This guy as a coach before we even got to high school, teaching us technique, and to have you as a baseball coach teaching us technique and getting us ready for stuff that we didn't think of back then, but like first and third situations, how to hit line drives versus trying to go for the fence and you're popping it up, What kind of organized sports did you guys have back Then going into high school, was it town league? Was there club?
It
what
was a
that?
lot different
Yeah.
in the sense that we played a lot of pickup games
Yeah.
throughout the whole year. The only organized sports were Little League.
Yeah.
And there was no Pop Warner.
Yeah.
Youth hockey started when we were kids, and not a lot of hockey players yet. So, and there was really no in-town basketball. We used to do schools. It was like by elementary school.
Yeah.
So the elementary schools would play against each other, like on Saturdays, that type of thing. So Pine Hill would play Deerfield. We'd play Bombardment against Pine Hill. So there was but when you went to junior high, you met the rest of the people in town. You did, unless you played Little League with the same guy. Like Dave and I went to different elementary school. When you went to 7th grade here, there was so many people you didn't know.
Yeah.
So the transitions were much more, I guess, in modern lingo, stressful. But it was just part of the way everyone lived.
I told this example with Jim and Joe Fabiano, and I want to tell it here as well. Where my uncle, sadly, he was very sick right around COVID, and we knew he was passing. So I was going in and spending as much time as I could. He was a close friend, and some of the best memories he had in his last days were his high school teammates coming in to see him. And they talked about the Bay State League. They talked about the big games. They talked about even the loss versus Walpole in a state championship. But to be able to tell those stories with guys who became some of his best friends
Right.
that he played with, there was no other light that could have lit him up the way it was,
Right.
with this
I mean, the
news.
Bay State League was iron.
Yeah.
Compared to now, it's a little
Yeah.
different now. But
Yeah.
I mean, if you played for Norwood or Walpole,
Wellesley.
that was iron.
Yeah.
Walter.
My dad played Bay State League, and in that league, one of the best hockey players, this guy, Walter Hereniak. Walter Hereniak
Oh,
was a
right.
hitting
Right.
coach for many years
Right.
for the Red Sox.
Yeah, Hebner, Skip Lockwood, all these guys.
Unbelievable. But it was a heck of a time. And, when we look at the 70s in Westwood, I think about, what you mentioned, the Dalton Award. So the Dalton Award, folks, it's an award that's given to a high school team, or high school organization, let's put it that way, in each division. And it's comprised of which high school had the most successful sports season. So, it's a hard award to win. Each year, different players and whatnot. Westwood had, I think, in the first 8 years, they had won 5 of them. And the 70s was where they got off to a hot start, and it was when you guys were playing. You know, one question I wanted to ask you guys is, you started off in the Dual County League, and eventually migrated to the Tri-Valley League, and that's how kind of the formation of this Thanksgiving game started between Westwood and Holliston. Before you guys made that migration, what was the Dual County League like? What were those bus rides like? Obviously going north of Boston and whatnot. Was there rivalries, in with certain teams, or was it just, it seemed like a league where you play a different schedule each year, and there's not much animosity towards any particular teams?
I think there were deeper rivalries. And
Really?
the reason is because they started in 7th grade. So you'd play these kids as 7th graders.
Yeah.
And then you'd play them as 8th graders. Certain guys would go through puberty earlier than others. And then you'd play with them in JV sports, 9th and 10th grade. And then we never made it to the varsity level except Dave in the Dual County. But you saw these kids from, puberty into young manhood.
Yeah.
And the rivalries were pretty fierce. So
Yeah.
like Newton North, we played against them in junior high, and they were awesome.
It's a
And-
Division I team, that you
yeah,
guys are
but
playing.
so you remember certain guys you'd play against as kids, and then as they become young men, some people become really impressive.
I think there were serious rivalries in that league.
Yeah.
Again, in the 60s and early 70s. Basketball with
Oh, yeah.
Acton Boxborough.
Yeah.
I think Acton Boxborough won a couple state titles, and
Yeah.
certainly our Thanksgiving Day game with Lincoln Sudbury was
Yeah.
an important game back then. So, and Newton North, the Newton team, I think Newton South
Newton
was in there
South,
too.
yeah,
So
Newton
yeah, there
South,
was,
yeah.
and they were bigger schools than us, good athletes, but we held our own, more than held our own.
That's the typical Westwood motto: is humble town. We're always punching above. When it comes to our opponents, the girls lacrosse the last 20 years are Division I.
Oh, incredible!
All right. Yeah.
Kate, your daughter won a state championship
Right,
playing
yeah.
at Westwood. But Westwood's always been that team that is always playing these larger teams, and we embrace it. It's good competition. Just in the last couple of years, you should see some of the competition. The golf team played Zavarian twice this year. Boys lacrosse played CM last year. You know, we never would have thought about this, you know, in the 80s, you know, probably 70s too, you know.
In the 70s, CM was amazing.
Yeah.
In football and basketball,
Hockey.
King Gaskins, hockey, they're exceptional athletic program.
Yeah. Freddie Kinsman out of Norwood was a CM guy, played at BC, a heck of an athlete. But it's remarkable because this is history. So you guys are in the dual county, and eventually 74 was the first season in the Tri-Valley League.
Yep.
How much heads up were you given that you guys were going to move to the Tri-Valley League? Was it something that they told you in 2 years we're moving, or was it, you know, was it more of a last minute decision?
I don't remember a lot.
I think it was kind of like spring. We're going to a different league. And we're like, okay, still get to play sports. Yep. All right, we'll show up.
Right.
So it was kind of like whatever.
It was a little bit like, okay, let's figure out where these guys. Okay, Medfield, Millis,
Yeah.
Medway. Okay,
A little closer drive, but
better
yeah.
drive out there and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And but it turned out to be clearly a very good move.
Oh, fantastic move. Were you familiar with any of those teams? Were there any non-league games, you know, that you had, or, you know, youth level games?
I really don't
Yeah.
think so. I think it was all, you know, the non-league games would be Bay State League games, or I don't remember.
I don't think we knew anything about them. We didn't even know where some of those towns were. Probably never heard of Medway in our lives.
Yeah.
Been to Medfield to get a pizza.
Yeah.
Millis was like could have been in Woonsocket.
You went to
just didn't
Lord's,
know it.
got a couple of yo-yos at Lord's in Medfield.
Yeah, I mean, Holliston, we didn't really know Holliston.
Yeah.
But, you know, Holliston became kind of the rival right off the bat because it just kind of lined up that way. But different sports, I know Medfield for basketball,
Yeah, they were
Dave, those
good.
were incredible rivalries.
Absolutely.
They were very good.
Absolutely. And before that year, you guys moved to the TVL, Westwood hired Paul Tuselli. He was the head coach of the 73 team, and he brought in Ray Kodzis, you know, a legendary math teacher, golf coach at Westwood. What were they like as coaches? What was their kind of coaching style? And was it similar or different to the previous coach?
Well, Coach Kodzis was for me the backfield coach.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time with him, and very, very positive guy. I guess I know, and he was a very good athlete.
Yeah.
You know, again, always stressed winning, stressed leadership, stressed doing the right thing. And he called a lot of good plays, or set up a lot of good plays as the offensive coordinator. So I enjoyed playing for him very much.
Yeah.
You know, Bill, you can talk about Coach Tuselli.
So Coach Tuselli changed the culture in Westwood dramatically. He was a no-nonsense guy.
Yeah.
He was very innovative with his training, weight training. We were clearly in the best shape of any team we ever played. We did in-season weight training, which was unheard of then.
Oh, yeah.
His protege, Mike Woysick, Mickey, we called him, became, you know, the strength coach in the pros, won 6 Super Bowls. But basically, Paul Tuselli, I'm sure Mike, if he was sitting here, Mickey would say the most influential guy in his life in terms of how he went to market, how he became interested in that whole development of weightlifting and health and training. But he was a very difficult guy he was a demanding coach. We worked really, really hard. But he totally changed the culture from a sport. Football in Westwood was not as serious until he got here. He came from Walpole, incredible winning tradition, coached with Lee. He was a defensive genius. And, you know, he impacted our lives dramatically.
Yeah.
But it was tough love with a capital T and a small L. And that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But he made us into young men.
Yep.
So prior to joining the TVL, did you guys play on Thanksgiving? And if so, who was that opponent? And what were those games like?
We played Lincoln Sudbury our sophomore year, and we're in the dual county. I mean, to me personally, Thanksgiving was probably the highlight of my athletic career in Westwood. Of all the things I've done, it was something we looked forward to dramatically. We talked about it. You know, you'd have a little couple. Almost 2 weeks between the last game and the Thanksgiving Day game. The Super Bowl was not the be-all and end-all then. Those things just started then. It was all about Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And then in 1974, you went to Holliston for Thanksgiving. And Lincoln Sudbury was probably more of a deeper rivalry at that time. What was it like going from a team like Lincoln Sudbury, where you guys probably had them circled on your calendar at the beginning of the season to an opponent like Holliston, where at the time you didn't really know who they were. You didn't know what you were expecting going into that game.
Well, I remember we did know Holliston. Holliston was good. I mean, they had certainly a couple of very good players.
They had one of the
team.
longest home winning streaks in the state at that point, and they had these two kids that ended up going to Penn State on full rides. Gary Peter Kuski, the quarterback who was all scholastic, played safety at Penn State, and they had a 6'5", 250 tight end named Ron LaPointe who also went to Penn State. And they were very dominant. They were the team that was supposed to, like, wipe us up.
Yeah, they were. And so, as you said, circle on the calendar, you know, going back, certainly just because it was Thanksgiving, whether it was Lincoln Sudbury or Holliston, you were thinking about it from game one on. And it was an exciting thing to be part of, as I'm sure it has been for many years, with everybody coming back. I think people would be 4 or 5 deep around the field. And you really wanted to play well and win. And whether that was Lincoln Sudbury or Holliston, that was the mindset. But no, I would not say we didn't know who Holliston was. They were a good team, and we knew they were going to give us all we could handle, which they did.
And the most vivid memory I probably ever had of high school sports is when we got to Holliston. First time we saw the field, we pull in, the field's kind of set down low. It was muddy as anything. They had practically no grass. And we fielded maybe 35 guys. We dressed 35. And Holliston came out to do their calisthenics. They dressed like 80 guys. Oh, yeah. And every 5 yards around the whole perimeter of the field, they did their jumping jacks, like trying to just fake us out and psych us out. Yeah. And I'm like, whoa. It was pretty impressive.
That's the true Westwood culture, is the underdog story, and that's all noise. You're not scoring touchdowns doing that. You know, I remember going to see girls, 2022 girls. It was the semifinals game for lacrosse against Lincoln Sudbury, and before the game, they're running across Westwood's field, and they're loud, and they're doing all these cheers. And I'm looking at the Westwood girls, and they're just business as usual, getting their routine down, and I'm like, that's what it's all about. You know, you're going to get these teams that have twice as many numbers as you, but you know what? We have 30 of the best that are dressed here these people have never seen play. And when that opening whistle goes off, they're in for a treat, you know, and you know, when you got 15, you know, you got guys playing both sides of the ball who have that motor, and you're doing these in-season workouts that are literally putting you on a gear that other teams in the league aren't on. That's such a huge advantage. And then football's a tremendous sport. It's kind of like boxing, where you're getting punched in the face here, they're getting punched in the face there. And at some point, one of the teams is like, oh, I don't know if I can keep doing this. You know, and if Westwood was that aggressor that's setting that tone early, and, you know, you're running smash mouth football down the field for the first quarter, like, it's a defeated attitude. It is hard to get out of that hole, you know. And a question that I have kind of, you know, added on top of that is the styles of football now are so different than the game 30 years ago. Now we're seeing spread offenses. We're seeing like 80% pass, 20% runs. Back, you know, then it seemed like there was a lot more runs. It seemed like there was a lot more power runs. The fullback was used. You know, you'd even throw a H-back in every now and then. What was the style of offense that you guys leveraged back then? And, you know, what was the percentage of pass versus run?
I think you got it right. I mean, we were a run first, certainly a defense-oriented team. Really good defense. Coach Tuselli taught that and was successful at teaching that. Not to say we didn't have some great running backs. I mean, when we were that first game in '74, our tailback was Mike Conway, just a fantastic athlete and runner, and we used him a lot. So I'd say, I don't know if it was 80% runs, but it might have been 70% runs, a lot of play action.
Got to be a lot of play action touchdowns, because they're just biting on those runs.
Right, exactly. And we had a fullback, Chip Coleman.
It was good.
Strong player. So that was the kind of power eye offense we ran.
Now, were you a running quarterback too? Because that's a tough offense to defend if you got to deal with that, you know, as well.
I was not a running
No.
I was on the other end.
You were the pocket. That's hand off and then throw.
That's right.
You know, one of the other things about football that's changed, I think, from the 70s to now is that back then it was a lot more of a physical game, a lot more hard-nosed. Who were some guys entering that first Thanksgiving game that really set the tone physically on both sides of the ball?
We were fortunate, Dave and I, we played with some amazing athletes. So, if I look back at the guys that were tone setters, the one guy that I think Dave would agree is a great friend of ours that was one of the captains, Mike Kelly, who ended up playing at Dartmouth in football, and he was one of the captains, and he's passed away now about 10 years ago. But he was the toughest kid I've ever seen in college football, high school football. I've never seen a guy physically and mentally tougher than him. And he went both ways, and he was extremely verbal, and he was not above pretending to be a coach on the field and barking orders at anyone he thought needed it.
Love it.
But he was, I think he's the toughest guy I ever played with.
Yeah, Kelly, Conway,
Was tough.
Luke Angeles, tough.
Luke was
tough.
great
Is
player.
there Monroe as well on
Doug
the
Monroe
yeah.
was
He was
a
a
great
fullback.
player.
Yeah, so it was. I think that was the way that, again, Coach Ducelli wanted it. You had to,
Yeah.
if you were going to play, you had to hit.
That's the game. I
defense.
mean, it's the war of attrition,
Yeah.
and we've talked to Coach Pindell, and we talked football with the captains as well. A lot of these games are won at the line of scrimmage.
They were.
and
Totally.
that's Bill Parcells says that's where the weight room kicks in. It's all the work that goes
We
in.
were
is
the
what wins
best
those
conditioned
games.
team by far, and but between our sophomore year to senior year, the overall team strength was dramatically improved with Paul Tucelli's training.
What were some of the training aspects he implemented into your regimen?
We did circuit weight training on Mondays and Wednesday after practice.
Wow.
We did full pads on Tuesdays and Wednesdays for between 3 and 4 hour practices, full pads hitting the whole time.
Oklahoma drills.
And off season, we lifted weights in the morning all winter and all spring, and all summer he had summer workouts. So he was the first one in Westwood that really made it into a commitment, as opposed to just playing a
Didn't we
seasonal
have that?
sport.
We went away, didn't we? For a
We
week?
went away to camp with Walpole one year.
Junction boys.
We went
We
camp
went somewhere.
with
Yeah.
Walpole, Freiburg, Maine.
Oh yeah,
So it was,
With
yeah.
Walpole,
it's right next door to Bridgeton.
And one year we went with Wakefield, so big,
Big
The
Division
big
I
towns, yeah,
teams.
the Warriors.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean those were those were gauntlets. Those were
Yeah.
long days.
Yeah.
You'd be in sneakers and shorts, 6 a.m. You'd run before breakfast.
Yeah.
You'd have half pads, full pads, lunch, half pads, full pads, dinner, meeting.
Yeah.
And then you'd get to go to bed.
A lot of ice packs. There was really no such thing as concussions back then. It was just you got your bell rung, get back out there. So it's
Yeah,
football's
stinger, your arm would go numb.
the stinger. I have had that plenty of time.
It'd be the stinger thing.
We had Lindsay Hallion on a couple weeks ago, and she shared a story that I can relate to, and I think you guys can relate to as well, where the culture in this town, you look up to those athletes ahead of you almost like professional athletes. So when you're kids, you go to the Thanksgiving game when you're in like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and you're seeing guys 5, 6 years ahead of you, and you're seeing these guys who look like titans out there. And you're like, I want to be that guy, and I want to emulate my leadership, or I want to emulate my style of play to that guy right there, playing both sides of the ball. And she named like Andrea Barr, Nikki Delaney, were girls ahead of her time. I watched Mike Welby as a kid and said, this guy, is a perfect example of who I would love to be someday when I wear this jersey. Were there players when you would watch the team as kids that you were struck by and you wanted to emulate your style of play or your leadership by when you would watch Westwood football back then?
Well, for me, it was Pete Voss. Pete Voss was quarterback
Holy
for
Cross.
Westwood, and then he
Yeah.
went on to be the quarterback at Holy Cross, and I think and coached.
Coach Notre Dame for a little bit?
Yeah,
Or,
he was a great player, and certainly someone that I watched when I think I was probably in 6th, 7th grade when he was the quarterback, and just remember some of the things he did in the football field were amazing.
Yeah, magic.
Magic, right?
And Dave and I both had older siblings, so my oldest siblings were like 10 years older than me. So I went to a lot of games in the 60s as a young kid, and I remember a guy like Dave Valentine, they used to call him China, Haywood Davis, who was an African American kid that lived in Westwood, who was like a fullback, just a baller.
Yeah.
I mean, they were larger than life, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah. These
was
are
a big-
these are your heroes because
Yeah.
you watch the Patriots, and the
There were-
Patriots weren't great back then. You know?
There was no cell phones. There was no video games.
Yeah.
Nothing was on TV. There was 3 stations, and your parents would say, it's light out, get out of the house.
Yeah.
And so you'd get on your bike and you'd drive up to see a football game with all your buddies. You'd play football in the field next to it, and you'd watch the game and you eat some popcorn or whatever. It was unbelievable. It was a simpler time. So, I mean, the game on Saturday was big time entertainment. There wasn't a whole lot going on.
Yeah. There was a cultural change, I think, at Westwood in the 70s where, and I think Kathy was a big part of it, with the girls basketball, where she wanted people to get into the gym early. So she made warm-up exciting. She blasted the music. She got them good warm-up uniforms and all that. And, the other teams really started picking up. The hockey hired Kevin Crow, who then turned him into a winning culture. And then, shortly after that, they started to go on their 41-year streak of making the playoffs. And, obviously football included in this. What were some of the special things about football when it comes to things like game day, the pre-game warm-ups, where there was like some swagger and just some excitement built around it that really made it fun, come, game days playing some of your rivals?
Well, for me, the thing that I remember most and thing that I enjoyed was the long, at the time, I don't know what it is now, but the long walk from the locker room out to the football field. And
Got a video of that.
Oh, do you?
today,
Just everybody there cheering you on. You'd get out there and then get in your lineup for warm-ups, and it was meaningful.
Plus, there were metal cleats, so you had
You're
metal
hitting the
cleats,
pavement,
click clack, click clack. You get the guys going out the click clack, and then we practiced so hard under Coach Tuselli that it wasn't exactly fun. Practice with him was not fun. So our time to have fun was on Saturday. So that was our day.
Yeah.
He's prepared us. We were kind of worked all week, and it was work. And then on Saturday, that's playtime, and that's when the game was ours. We're on the field. We're going to do what we need to do.
Yeah.
So that was our time to shine and have a blast.
And when Holliston was told to you guys, hey, this is your Thanksgiving game, it's out of your control. They're just kind of telling you, and you say, all right, well. And I think the rivalry kind of was built up sooner than expected because they were a good team.
They were.
And so was Westwood. And there was, I think it was either the TVL championship or runner-up that was on the line for that initial game. And talk us through about that. What do you remember from that first game? And obviously it was a low-scoring game because both teams were so talented. They played terrific defense. But what are some of the feelings, memories that come back when you think about that first Westwood versus Holliston game in 1974?
I remember, I think every Thanksgiving day that we played was beautiful weather. It was clear, cold, crisp. I certainly remember the point Bill brought up about Holliston circling the field. That's the first time when I really thought these guys are really serious. I mean, you heard about them, you knew about their 2 great players, their record was very good, but that's when it was. That's when it really got serious. And I remembered from the very first, it seemed the hitting and the physicality of that game were up a notch from what it had been, in some of the previous games. And again, led by the defense. It was hard to move the ball. We ran, as I said, 70% of the time, and they were good. Our defense was great. So I think a lot of the game was played kind of between the 30-yard lines.
Right.
But it was stressful because you knew you were one mistake away from the game being tied or gone. So you had to be precise.
I agree with Dave. I think of all the high school games I played in, it was clearly probably the most physical game I ever played in. Yeah. And you had players that were just a head above almost anyone else you ever played against. I never played against a better tight end in high school or college. Yeah. That quarterback, Peter Krusky, was one of the best athletes I've ever played against in any sport. And, it was incredibly physical. I played on defense. Mike Woysick was the MVP that year, and he had like 18 tackles. I mean, he was a dominant high school player. He was a linebacker and did not play in college. He was a great discus guy. Yeah. And he did through the discus at BC. But it was incredibly physical.
Yeah. I remember the bus ride home. That was fun.
And the turkey. The turkey.
And the turkey.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. that was fun.
There's something special though about the Thanksgiving game. It really does bring out the whole town, so it's different than any other game you'll play. And when you see that packed stadium, it's a different type of pack than anything you're normal to.
There was no night games then.
No, yeah.
There was no Friday night lights. Only Ashland had night game.
Yeah.
So if you're going to play varsity for 2 years, you're going to play one night game in your high school career.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was one of our favorite games we played together.
That's awesome. And then the second year, we
you
talk
also
about.
remember just one other thing. You remember, at least at our games, a lot of the fathers stood together.
Yeah.
So you'd see that pack over
Oh,
there
yeah.
evaluating you on everything.
You'd hear them.
You'd
They got their
them.
hands-
And,
the hands
Mr.
crossed.
Cataldo.
Mr.
Yeah.
Conway. They'd let you know if you were performing.
It's still.
Doug Monroe's dad, Herbie,
Yeah.
not bashful.
Right. So
It's
they
still
were,
the same. You
Is
see
it?
the fathers section,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
they
is
got their arms,
Oh,
crossed, and,
exactly. Yeah.
and they don't because they don't. You don't hear them yell, but you can just tell from the body language, like if
They
it's
yell
good or
then.
bad.
yeah.
The second Thanksgiving game, which was your senior year, was another low-scoring game, and it was a terrific defensive game by a certain player. Talk a little bit about who that was, and how interesting that game was based off of the first play of the game, and then the additional safety that was added on top of that.
Well, Dan Toll. I mean, he's one of these guys that if you followed football, you might not ever hear his name mentioned except for maybe making a tackle here and there.
Yeah.
He was in the trenches, did the dirty work,
Yeah.
but he made the big plays.
Yeah.
The touchdown return for an interception,
First play of the game too.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
and he went on to play at Williams.
Yeah.
Smart kid, great kid,
Yeah.
leader, and so it was. Every game you could pick a couple guys out that did something special, which
Yeah.
made that team so much fun because there was a lot of spread around talent. It wasn't just one or two guys.
That's
And
a
I
sign
think I'd be remiss. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention another guy who had a fantastic game our senior year, which was Bill.
Yes. Yep.
Bill,
Mentioned it in the yearbook.
50-year anniversary.
Yeah,
Yes,
50
yes.
years.
He,
It's mentioned it in the yearbook. Played terrific. Both sides of the ball.
So this,
but,
so we had mentioned this kid a couple of times. This guy Ron LaPointe,
Yeah.
who he went on to play at Penn State. I played football and basketball against him. I think he was about 6'5", tight
Big
end,
kid.
strong
Yeah.
kid, fast kid. They threw to him a lot, and so from the beginning of the week, my friend Bill here, he was given the assignment to cover Ron LaPointe.
Yeah.
And he'd say, you know what I'm having for Thanksgiving? I'm having leg of LaPointe. And he said, oh, really? Oh, yeah, leg of every day, leg of LaPointe, leg of LaPointe, leg of LaPointe. And after a while, we said, well, I guess Billy's having leg of LaPointe. And sure enough,
We watched a ton of film. We watched a ton
Yeah.
of film, and like when you had to study hall,
Yeah.
get down. I remember with Mike Kelly watching film all week, and just you get amped up.
Yeah, he
talking
was-
about that.
And so Bill had just a fantastic game. I don't know what the statistics were, but obviously LaPointe didn't score, and we won the game,
Yeah.
and Bill was the MVP. So it was
Sideline to
it was
sideline.
good.
It was so much fun. We had so much fun. We had so many great guys. Dave and I are still on a text chain with a bunch of Westwood guys, and we still talk to guys that were on that team like Luke Angelis,
Yeah.
Mike Kelly passed away, God rest his soul. Mike Catello, Godspeed. But there was just so many amazing people that you made relationships for your lifetime.
And question on top of that: how many of those teammates, whether it was high school or college, were in your wedding?
Dave was in my wedding.
Yeah.
I think that was it.
Because we tell the kids, I go, these are some of the
I had to
best
let
friends.
my brothers in.
Yeah, my brother was my best man. Sorry, Way.
Well, we tell a lot of the kids, I go, you're making some of the best memories of your life out
Totally.
there, and there's a good chance that some of these people will be in your wedding.
Yeah.
So we have an example here, folks.
One of the questions I have is, when you guys played in that first game, did you ever think 50 years from now that there would be the rivalry it is today?
No, I mean, in high school, the big thing in my mind, but Dave and I both, were pretty good in math, and I used to always think like the millennium in the year 2000. How old are you going to be? You're going to be 43. That seemed like an eon,
Yeah.
And so I never thought of the rivalry or the whole thing, but it's kind of cool. We're having our 50th anniversary of our graduation next year, and this is the 50th year of our second game. So it's just so cool.
Yeah.
my kids, I get to kind of brag a little bit, and they're like, okay, Dad, I'm glad Thanksgiving only comes once a year.
Is Westwood one of the larger schools in this league now, or are they still one of the smaller ones?
They're in the TVL large. So now the TVL has so many teams now that they have.
Hopkinton's a big school now.
Hopkinton, like girls soccer is Division I.
Oh, okay. All right.
Westwood, the enrollment's definitely up from when I went in 2005. But they do have large and small. So the TVL large is Hopkinton, Ashland, Westwood, Norwood is now in the TVL, which, Bay State
Okay.
Power,
All right.
Dedham as well, which
Dedham's
was,
in
a great,
Tri Valley?
yeah.
Wow.
Dedham in 1989 state championship game versus Brockton. Now they're playing Westwood,
Yeah, right.
so
I mean, Walpole was legendary in football when we were in high
at the
school.
90s. And I think Tuselli left Westwood at some point and went to Walpole.
He went back, yeah.
Yeah, and they beat Brockton in a state championship
they?
in like
Yeah.
90, 91, right around then. And my dad said he's at the game, and he said the D tackles are like 150 pounds, and the Brockton guys are like 280, 290.
Yeah, Walpole was amazing.
Todd Collins, out of Walpole.
Yeah.
But what a time football was back then. Just so many, and back then too was football. How much of the players were football only versus guys like Dave and yourself, Bill, who played other sports? Were most people playing multiple sports, or were there people just football only?
I think most guys played more than one sport.
Yeah.
There was very little specialization. Even hockey players then did not play 12 months a year.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of, minded the seasons and either played a sport or
Yeah.
did something else. If you weren't playing baseball or basketball, maybe you're running track and lifting weights.
Yeah.
If you're a football player.
Yeah.
But most guys, particularly the guys that ever touched the ball, those guys always played more than one sport.
And the coaches we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, they encouraged it.
Yeah.
They wanted
That's
you to
awesome.
play
Yeah.
other sports, get a different perspective from a different coach. And so I think most people were
And
at least two sports.
It was viewed as it wasn't viewed as an avenue to get somewhere else. It was viewed as an activity to have fun and to build friendships and learn how to work together and have fun and good values. It wasn't as career centric as some of the sports is now in terms of specialization, specialized coaching, travel leagues. You got to get to the next elite team. It wasn't like that.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, sports, when done correctly, you're learning how to be a teammate.
Yeah.
You're also learning what's my role, because when you go on to the business world, everyone has different roles. This person's in charge of the money. This person's in charge of sales. And, you got to stick to your role, to have success with that.
Right.
And I think football also teaches you to kind of swallow your ego at times, where, hey, I want goals. I want to be the best at this. I want this many interceptions or this. But at the end of the day, what's most important is wins.
It's a great team game, and it teaches patience, tolerance, discipline, and just if one of your teammates makes a mistake, you try to make a better play to help them out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys mentioned some of your football teammates. I'd be remiss not to talk about some of the outstanding athletes of that generation as well. The 70s were incredible. You have not only just Jimmy Fabiano, you got Nancy, Linda, and the triplets. You got McCoys.
The McCoys were
you
great.
Amazing.
Harringtons.
Brian
Great family.
And then I didn't even know about Michael Fabiano till 2 weeks ago. An incredible running back. But who were some of the players back then in your era that inspired you, but you didn't play the same sport? They weren't on your team, but you went out and saw a play, and you're like, it's hard not to be inspired about how that person plays.
You mentioned the Harringtons. I mean, Dave and I played football all 4 years. Two of the best football players that probably ever could have played in Westwood ended up not playing after their freshman year because of injury.
Wow.
Brian Harrington, who became a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Rob Bolster was probably one of the best running backs ever at Westwood High School. Was going to be a starter with Conway his sophomore year. He blew his knee out. He was an unbelievable pitcher. For the baseball team, he came back after rehabbing his knee, and knees then were much more serious injury than now.
Yeah.
The operational techniques were much different, much more drastic.
Yeah.
Brian Harrington became an amazing soccer player. So I never played football with him again after freshman year, but I looked up to him as a real athletic leader. And I didn't play basketball. There was a lot of great basketball players I looked
Another
up to.
1,000-point scorer, Harrington, and Dave yourself, 1,000-point scorer in basketball.
No 3-pointer. No. And freshmen
It's
didn't
incredible.
play. Freshmen didn't play varsity then.
Was that for all sports?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Freshmen never
didn't
played
play
varsity.
Yeah, and that my dad. That wasn't the same thing in the '60s.
It wasn't even available.
Yeah.
Even if you were.
You
an
could have
elite
been the
player.
best. Like Richie
Yeah.
Hebner, I don't think played
No.
freshman.
Which made it kind of cool because you built that camaraderie at the
Yeah.
freshman level.
Yes.
And some of the, like Dave mentioned, our JV baseball coach, playing JV baseball was one of the most fun teams I've ever played on. We were like 13-3,
Yeah.
won the dual county league, and we had a ball.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you mentioned, I don't need to mention anybody specific, or I could,
Yeah.
but because you probably talked about them all with Coach Delaney Smith, but the improvement and the performance of the women's, certainly the basketball team and the swimming team, that was inspiring. I mean,
Absolutely.
those guys would go out and just win.
Yeah.
They would just find a way to win, and they were fun to watch and good athletes out there. Nancy McDermott,
Yeah,
Carol Mather,
yeah.
they were good players who played the game the right way, and obviously they got the results.
Yeah, it does remind me of the Kristen Chelmans, the Lindsay Hallians, Paula Sheehan's when I was in high school, and they were on
Amazing
their
athletes.
streaks. Unbelievable. And what I got inspired by is they are on like a 60-game winning streak, and they're just getting ready for the next game. And I'm kind of just like trying to tap into their mindset to see. I'd be a little nervous. Like, you don't want this one to be the game, right? They weren't thinking about that. They were just so dialed into loving the competition, loving games, loving game day, and just, trusting that, all right, we work harder than everyone else. We're prepared. We do everything we can to set ourselves up for success. All we have to do now is execute. It really changed my mindset of kind of how I prepare for games when I saw how loose they were and how prepared they were. And it wasn't because they didn't take it seriously. It was because all of that prep was done before the game,
Right.
and I think it's so cool at Westwood when you get to see some of these athletes, how they prepare and how they, play and perform on the field. I try to draw some of those things into my game too,
Right.
and it's,
Kathy Delaney and Leslie Frank
yes,
were
yeah.
two of the best coaches I've ever seen at any level.
Having any
The
level.
way they went to market, the
Yeah.
way they taught incredible values. I mean,
Yeah.
they developed great people, not just great players.
Yeah.
Leslie would have the young women do charity work. They'd clean people's lawns. They do things that a lot of coaches wouldn't dream of asking their players to do.
Yeah.
But it was just it was a culture of giving back.
Yeah.
And it was pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, there's a correlation too of how successful these kids have become too in their professional lives. When I was talking to Kathy, and some of the people she's coached at Harvard that are world leaders. She coached like Maura Healey, governor of Massachusetts. She's coached attorney generals. She's coached all types of leaders. And when you ask them questions about who are some of your biggest influences, she's right at the top of the list.
Totally.
When it comes to people that they've inspired. I actually asked her personally, I said, I see a lot of similarities between Jackie McMullen and her. One being that it wasn't easy for Coach Delaney Smith. She was fighting Title IX while she was coaching at Westwood. They were kind of giving her the harder schedules during the school year as like, oh, well, you want to do that? Here you go. You get the last 3 blocks with no time off, of classes. And, they made it was a little bit more difficult because of that fight she had.
Totally.
Jackie, on the other hand, she is in a male-dominated profession, and they weren't nice to her. Reggie White from the Eagles and also the Packers
Right.
said, women don't belong in the locker room,
Right.
to her face. And she said, you know what? I don't care. This is my job. I'm going to do my job. And she was one of the highest respected male or female, writers, sports columnists of all time. But I saw similarities in both of them because they weren't afraid to fight for what's right.
Kathy Delaney was an incredible leader in the way she did everything.
Yeah.
And I remember distinctly, like in the winter, like lifting weights in the weight room. And when she had her practice, you could not walk through the gym to go through another door. And if you did, you would hear about it and you would never do it again. Her practices were like closed practices. That's her gym time.
Yeah.
and you might be a BMC in your mind with your leather jacket, and you're not going to walk through her practice ever in a million years.
I heard a story, maybe you guys can confirm this. The Title IX was so bad back then that and rightfully so that she was fighting it, that they used to have the away team dress in the girls' locker room, and they would be like on the road, the girls' basketball team. They'd come home and they couldn't even change in their own locker rooms because they allowed the away team for the boys to be in there. And she had said, she had already given the pre-warning, like, if they're in there when we get back, we're going in. I don't care, what's going on. And what do you see? They're in the locker room. She says, girls, go in there. Dick Hargrave's at the door because I think Bader said, hey, make sure she doesn't do this. She's just crazy enough to do this, And Dick Hargrave's at the door, and she's like, Dick, there's nothing that's going to stop you from us getting in there. So they all go in there. All of a sudden they hear,
Good for her.
Never again after that. But she had to set that precedent because, it would honestly, the female sports are treated
was
like second
archaic,
class.
right.
Yeah, it was second class citizens.
People now
back
would
then.
not believe that ever happened.
And today it's different because of Kathy,
Totally.
and the fight that she had and, what she fought for. So Bill grew up in Westwood and you raised your family in Westwood. How special was that to raise your family in the town that you grew up in and were so beloved in and that you loved back?
It was one of the biggest pleasures of my life. First of all, being a dad is the best job I've ever had. And having a son and two daughters that get to play sports at every level, in high school and in college, but start out in Westwood and seeing them play on the same fields I played at and watching, my son play in the same Little League field that Dave and I played on, and my daughters going to the same schools we went to. It was just, it was an incredible thrill for me, and it made Westwood even more of my hometown.
Yeah.
And your son was drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates after playing college at Elon. How special is that for you and your family, seeing your son drafted?
It was one of the most favorite times I've ever had. I remember I was at work, and he didn't get drafted the first day, so he was kind of down. And the second day, I was listening to it on a live stream at ESPN at work, and then when he got drafted, he didn't even know. I called him up and got a chance to tell him. And then walking home to the train, I called one of our dear friends, Dave Clement, who passed on. He played sports with us, and he passed actually the next day, and it's one of the last things he ever heard me telling him. But so it was just it was a nice moment because I got a chance to see a kid that I saw play Little League and Pop Warner and hoops and hockey with Charlie and you, Morgan. And your dad was an amazing coach. And then I got to see my daughters, play sports in high school and college, and it's a blessing, to be able to. I could have had 3 piano players, which is great if you want to be a great piano player, but they weren't piano players; they were athletes. So it was a gift.
Not only you get to see him play, college sports, you got to see at Trinity, which is pretty cool too.
Yeah, my daughter got to go to our alma mater, and she won a national championship at Trinity in lacrosse, and
Incredible.
She was All-American, Division III, and it was just what a thrill to see my daughter go to the same school we went to, and her star shined a lot brighter than mine did. I'll tell you that.
I remember
that's an understatement.
I remember. I actually remember the day Pat got drafted because he was down in Newport.
Correct.
We were down in Newport, and I was living down there, and Charlie was living down there, and he gets the call. We couldn't be more ecstatic for him. We knew how hard he worked. I mean, he was playing Team Connecticut baseball. He was doing a lot of these things during the summer. In between college, he was playing the college leagues and whatnot. And each year he was getting better and better. And then when he started playing catcher, his game even went through the roof. And then when we saw him got drafted, it was awesome. We were down there, we celebrated. We went to I think we went to it wasn't the Landing, it was Dockside.
Yeah.
Went to Dockside and Ratage. It was a bunch of Westwood guys.
It was cool.
But what an amazing moment. It's part of Westwood history. We were talking about it with Jim Fabiano. I go, not too many people can say out of Westwood they got drafted, professionally. That grew up.
Yeah,
raised in Westwood.
it was very cool.
And he played with Brock Holt, in
Yep,
Double A, and that's pretty cool too. Just growing, being in AA together and playing together.
Single
cutting
A,
your teeth.
sorry.
A single A.
But still pretty cool.
Playing with Brock Holt.
Yeah, Brock Holt was a shortstop then,
Yeah.
and Pat was playing third base, which was really neat.
Yeah, that was awesome. Just because, it really puts on the radar. It reminds us, even though we live in a small town, anyone can chase after their dreams. And I said to Kathy, I go, we're so appreciative of you because you show anyone can get to that top level. Same thing with Jackie McMullen, and same thing with Pat. If you want to go be a professional athlete, there's someone did it out of Westwood. And we've been saying about Mark Arthur. Mark Arthur is
Totally.
Stanley Cup champion now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
He's a senior executive with the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, that's great.
And
Great kid.
Part of what we do is we obviously want to talk about the history, but we also want to show these kids examples of what people did that went through that same high school, 200 Manhattan, Westwood High School, what they were able to accomplish. And, hear their story of how they did it, And some of the questions I want to ask, and I want to get your feedback on, is to really kind of chase after those, big dreams that you have. There's got to be some component of taking risks. What's your perspective on risk taking, positive or negative? And, what are some of the risks that you've taken personally, professionally, that you're most proud of and that are good examples for kids, who are looking to try something new but too scared to?
You can go first.
Well, I think certainly when you're young,
Yeah.
it's important to take risks.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to take risks in your career because generally I've found that if you take them and you have confidence in yourself, they'll work out.
Yeah.
I think when I look back on my career, one of the things that was a risk, we had a young family. We had 3 children who were under the age of 5 or 5 and under. And I was working for Ray-Ban Sunglasses, Bausch & Lomb, and up in Rochester, New York, which was where my wife was from, and a nice, comfortable life. And they asked me to move to London, and which was obviously going to be upsetting, an upset to our life. But we sat down and all credit to my wife. She was right on board. Said, this is going to be a good thing for us. Yeah, it's risky because you don't. It's a different country. You don't know the people. Sometimes you're forgotten about once you leave the headquarters. But all that being said, we went out, took the risk, and it was one of the best things I've ever done. So, I would say certainly early in your career, or even as you're under 40, under 45, if you have confidence in yourself and confidence in your skills, take that risk because you'll make it work out and you'll end up better off.
Incredible.
Dave was incredibly successful in sports, academics, in business, as a person. He had incredible parents that I love dearly. He had incredible role models with his 2 older brothers. Did quite well for himself, and a lot of it comes down to taking that risk to go to London.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I was in the sales world for a Fortune 500 equipment maker, and in that world, and I took a chance like Dave. I had 2 kids, and we moved to New York, and actually Darien. I worked on Wall Street, and became a bond salesman for Lehman, and changed the course of my life. It was just something. And I remember telling people, and they, well, why are you doing that? I'm like, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? The worst thing that could happen, I could not like it or be bad at it. I can always come home and do what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And we ended up having our 3rd child down in Connecticut, and it made the transformation of my professional life. It catapulted it in terms of just confidence, being able to take a flyer, put your heart and soul into it, and then see that it worked. And it's like, why not? So it just opened up my ability to do other things. Made me a better dad, made me a better husband.
Yeah. And how much do you, I always try to tell these kids that confidence is similar to the confidence of when you're on a team and you don't know what the season's going to do, but things you can control is say, yes, I'm going to do it. Okay.
Right.
That's a big start. And then work hard, hit the weights, prepare, reps, doing all that. And it's no different than when you do take those jobs of it starts with committing. You're all in now. What's your game plan? And then when you do accomplish, kind of what you did, that level of confidence, it's bulletproof,
Right.
and it's it just makes you a better at everything, a better dad, a better person, more resilient person. And I think those are two beautiful examples of the benefits of doing it. And especially these kids who are young when it comes to making decisions about college, go study abroad. You know what? Don't be afraid to go too far from home if
Right.
it makes the most sense.
Right.
You know what? If you're scared that you think going to be in a pre-med is a lot of work and all that, give it a try. What's the worst that can happen?
Exactly.
Switch your major.
Right. Never up, never up, never in.
Yeah,
And we talked about a lot of coaches here tonight, and you mentioned Kevin Crow. Dave and I played for Kevin Crow in junior high in soccer.
Yeah.
He was a great coach. Russ Downs had a huge impact on our life in terms of he's an incredible family man. He's a very
Absolutely.
spiritual guy.
A faithful man.
He would never do anything wrong. He would never lie. He was like a
Pure.
great role model as a human being.
Yeah.
And Joe Guerin taught us about so much about life.
Yeah.
The other coaches, it's amazing what we learn from those. I think of them all the time, and I think of sports is the ultimate metaphor for any endeavor I've ever done, whether it's me coaching my own kids or other kids, or just being a dad, certainly in business, being a part of a team. We all win together, we all lose together.
Yeah.
And that's the way life should be.
Beautiful. This is fantastic and awesome conversation too. And this is great. And the last couple questions, I want to ask you guys, tying it back to Thanksgiving. How much tabs do you keep on Westwood football year over year, especially comes to Thanksgiving? Is it something that do you make it to a game here and there, and how special is it still having that connection for something that was a special connection for you many years ago?
Oh, I certainly keep track of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you check that out to see who won, who played well, what the score was. And I think, over the years I've come back, probably 3 or 4 times to, at Westwood, not out to Holliston.
Yeah.
And it's always exciting. It's always fun to get up early and make the drive up and just remember what it was like. God, 50 years ago now.
Does the hair stand up?
And having lived in Westwood as a dad,
Yeah.
Obviously I was really connected with the town still. Even if one of my kids went to private school, I was still connected to Westwood. And one of my sisters lived in Holliston, and one of her daughters bought their house, and so I got grandnieces and nephews that would, it's still
Part of
kind
the
of
enemy.
a rivalry,
Yeah.
and so it's a family thing. And it's to me, there's nothing better than a Thanksgiving Day football game. It sets our part of the country apart from most other parts of the country. Eastern Connecticut, most places don't play on Thanksgiving.
No. And what I remember too from my days, and I'm sure there was going on in the 70s, 80s, is the coverage of the football. When you get home, you eat the turkey, and then you put on Channel 5.
Oh,
Mike
was
Lynch,
the man.
and Mike Dowling, covering. I got a clip, that we'll put on, but
Very
that
cool.
coverage was the best, to recap the whole day. And it's like I don't even know who's in the Middlesex League. I don't care, but that's pretty cool. It looked like that was a good game, But they would recap those games, and it just made that day so special, especially if you won. And,
especially if you won. And you were explaining a little bit about how Thanksgiving Day games are viewed today. And not living in state, I'm not fully aware of it, but it sounds like it might have lost a little bit of the luster, which is too bad because it was really important back then.
It was 2 years in a row. Westwood had to win on Thanksgiving to make it into the playoffs,
right?
And which made it those physical games. And it was. And you know what? You guys would appreciate it too, because one of the games was 7-0.
Was it?
Yeah. And it was
old school.
Old school. You know what? It was old school rap. First guy rap, second guy get the ball on the ground. You had to gang tackle. Because there was always good running backs. There was always someone who could. Was 1,500-yard runner, for the season. Sometimes 2,000. It couldn't take one. It took, a full team effort. So it was definitely some old school feels to
Good
that.
fun.
But,
Good
yeah.
fun.
But guys, thank you so much
Thanks
for
for having
coming
us.
on. This is a lot of fun. We certainly want to do more of these, in
Yeah.
the future.
Thanks for
And
having us.
I know there'll be a lot of people that are very interested in this conversation, and it's history. We talked about history and also how special this town is, and you combine that together. It's a great conversation.
Thanks,
So,
Morgan. Thanks, Evan. Thanks for having us. It was a blast.
well, thank you guys. And Evan, where can one watch the game if they're not going to be able to attend in person?
If you're not able to go out to Holliston, you can watch it live on Holliston Hub HCAT television on YouTube. They carry the game live, and they have a couple of the previous games on their YouTube channel as well.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to it. Less than a week away, and really appreciate you guys all tuning in, and we're looking forward to seeing you all in the next one.